Welcome to Concept 2 Notes. These are the same notes regardless of what class you're in, and we're going to be talking about the properties of matter. So we've already talked about how we can kind of categorize matter into different groups like substances and mixtures and all that jazz. But the properties of matter are really like characteristics. And by observing and measuring them, we can then describe matter even better than just saying it's a compound or it's a homogeneous mixture. And so there are two overarching categories of properties. They can be physical properties or they can be chemical properties. And physical properties can be used to separate mixtures really easily. Chemical properties, we'll see that in order to observe a chemical property or measure it, we actually have to change the substance, which is kind of interesting. So we'll get into all of that. But we're going to start by talking about physical properties. So physical properties are properties that can be observed directly or measured about a piece of matter, a type of matter, without changing the chemical identity of the substance. So I can look at a sample of matter and I can find out its density, which we'll talk about in a second. I can measure its mass on my digital scale, its volume, which can be calculated geometrically or using water displacement. I can describe its shape, like it's in the shape of, a cube. I can measure its boiling point, its state of matter. Is it a solid, liquid, gas? Its color, its luster, how shiny it is, if it's hard or squishy. Like these are all things that I can observe or measure without messing with the matter, if that makes sense. Now we're going to zoom in on a few physical properties that you may not know much about. And so we want to make sure you do. So first is melting point, which we'll talk more about this in concept 3, states of matter. But this is a temperature at which a solid becomes a liquid. And like water has a specific melting point, okay? Just like acetic acid has a specific melting point. So these are ways that we can identify matter as well if we know what their melting points are. So melting point is the temperature we get to with the amount of energy we need for a solid to then change into its liquid form. Boiling point is similar. It's just the temperature to go from a liquid to a gas. Viscosity is, there we go. Viscosity is another one I love. This is a property specific to fluids. Fluids are liquids and gases. And it describes a fluid's resistance to flow. So it's a physical property only of fluids, and it can change with temperature. So think of how thick it is. So I think of honey. Honey that sits in my pantry in its container is extremely viscous. It has a high resistance to flow. It's honestly hard to squeeze out of the bottle, okay? But if I heat that honey a little bit, its viscosity decreases. It's less resistant to flow, and it flows out of the bottle a little bit better. That's what we mean by viscosity. So to help you remember the difference, it might help you to write down like syrup or honey have high viscosities. Water is low. It flows very easily, and it does not resist flow very much. Okay, another physical property you may not know about is solubility. This is a measure of how well one substance dissolves in another. So solute is what is being dissolved. Example, lemonade powder or Kool-Aid powder. Whereas the solvent is what would be doing the dissolving. So that would be like the water. And it's going to make a solution. That's the result. And if you remember from concept 1, a solution is a homogeneous mixture of two or more substances that are uniformly dispersed throughout. Okay. So like lemonade is an example. If a substance has a high solubility, it's really soluble, it'll dissolve really, really well. What we see is that like often dissolves like. That's a principle we can use to predict solubility. So we'll get into this more in the honors students because we'll have a whole 4th concept on this. But essentially like salt dissolves well in water because salt is a polar molecule and water is a polar molecule. Whereas oil does not dissolve really at all in water. Like you can try to mix oil and water, but they'll always separate out because oil is non-polar and water is polar. And like dissolves like. So that's something we see with solubility. So that's something we can look at as well as a physical properties, how well it dissolves. And then another is density, and it's represented by this Greek letter rho, which is kind of like to me, it's like a fancy lowercase p. So density is the rho, that's what its abbreviation is for, and it's a measure of the compactness of matter, how compact it is. So if it has a high density, it's really compact. And if it has a low density, it's not very compact. Okay, think of like a sponge. A sponge has a low density because it's not very compact. There's like holes in it and stuff. Compared to like concrete floors seem to be more dense than a sponge because they're harder and they're more compacted in there. And it's measured as mass per unit of volume. So its units are typically grams per centimeter cubed if we found volume geometrically, or grams per milliliter if we're using volume of a liquid, or we found it using water displacement, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, here's something really interesting. Density does not change regardless of size. So it doesn't matter if you have 10 kilograms of gold versus 2 grams of gold. It would still have the same density. Water, its density is like 0.997 grams per milliliter or something like that. So essentially 1 gram per milliliter. It doesn't matter if you have a swimming pool of water or a cup of water, the density is 1 gram per milliliter. Okay, so that's why density can be used to identify different types of matter if we have like a chart of known densities. Okay, so this is one equation we're going to use if you've enjoyed having a break from math. It's back just a little bit though, and that's density is mass divided by volume. Again, your mass is going to be measured in grams. We're usually going to get that value using a scale to find it, a digital scale. Volume is measured in milliliters or centimeters cubed. 1 milliliter is equal to 1 centimeters cubed, and we can find volume 2 different ways. So here are the 2 different ways that we can find volume when we're trying to calculate density. So first, if we're looking at a solid object, if it's a regular shape, we can just use a ruler and the right geometric equation. So for example, if something's a cube like this Rubik's Cube, or it's like a rectangular prism, like an Amazon box, okay, you're just going to do the length times the width times the height. That gives you your volume. Now, if it's a cylinder, okay, like this, like what tennis balls come in, then volume is pi r squared h, where r is the radius of the circle on one side and then h is the height, okay? Regardless, we're measuring in centimeters cubed. So this is different ways that you can calculate volume if it has like a regular shape. For our purposes, we're going to mainly be doing this, except for a little lab activity we'll do where we will use the pi r squared h, and you just use a calculator. This equation will be given to you. Don't stress, okay? But let's do an example of this. So what is the density of a 40-gram box measuring 10 centimeters by 5 centimeters by 2 centimeters? Okay, so we're going to use our radar method for problem solving. If you're new to It's Not Rocket Science, this is something we always do to solve quantitative problems to help us never leave a question blank. So first, R is for reading. So we just read it. Now we're going to analyze A, and we're going to identify what do we know and what do we not know? What are we looking for? So what are we looking for? It says, what is the density? Okay, so we're using that fancy rho, Greek letter rho for density. Now, what do we know? We know mass is 40 grams, and we do not know volume, but we do know we have a length and a width and a height. What else? Now we need to diagnose. What equations will we need to do this? Well, we're definitely going to need the density equation. And because it's a box, we know we're going to use the length times width times height to find volume. So we're going to need this equation too. Now we draw a line because this is kind of all my background work. Now I'm going to start solving things. We're going to start assessing. That's the other A. So volume is length times width times height. So that's 10 times 5 times 2. You punch that in your calculator and you get 100 centimeters cubed. Okay, remember this is centimeter times centimeter times centimeter. That's where the centimeter cube comes from. But R, again, we reflect. Are we done? No, because our original ask was for density. So now we have to keep going. Density equals mass over volume. So that's 40 over 100, which we just calculated. You divide and you get 0.4 grams per centimeter cubed. Okay? Now, another way we can calculate or find volume to calculate density is using volume of a liquid or an irregular solid or an irregularly shaped solid. So you can use a graduated cylinder. If it's a liquid, you just put in a graduated cylinder and you read the volume at the bottom of the meniscus or the curve in the liquid. But if it's an irregularly shaped solid, or we can say an irregular solid, a funky shape, or you don't know the geometric equation for it, you can use water displacement as a method, and we would still be finding the volume in milliliters, okay? Here's how you do water displacement. You put enough water in a graduated cylinder to cover the object. Write down your initial volume or make note of it. Like let's say you fill it up to 40 milliliters, okay? Then you add your object to the water in the graduated cylinder and then record the final volume with the object in it. So let's say I add my object and now it jumped from 40 to 60 milliliters. And then I just subtract final velocity minus initial. So 60 minus 40 would give me 20 milliliters, and that would tell me the volume of the object. So all these steps make it sound complicated, but it's really, really simple to do. Okay, let's do an example. So radar, let's read. A sample of aluminum is put into 10.5 milliliters of water. If the water rises to 13.5 milliliters when the aluminum is added, what is the density of the aluminum if it has a mass of 8.1 grams? Okay, analyze. What are we looking for? They're asking us for density. What do we know? We know the mass is 8.1 grams. We don't know the volume, okay, but we do have two different volumes here, so we can find the volume of just the aluminum. All right, diagnose. What equations will we use? Well, we're definitely going to need density, which is mass over volume. And because we have two different water, like liquid measurements here of the water, we're going to use that volume equals VF minus VI. So first, let's find volume. We're going to plug in the bigger number minus the smaller number, and we get that the difference is 3 milliliters. Okay, so that difference represents the volume of just the aluminum that was added. Now we can plug in and find the density of the aluminum. So it's going to be 8.1 grams, that's my mass, over my volume, which is 3. And I plug that in and I get a density of 2.7 grams per milliliter. You got to watch out with your units. Your units have to match the mass and the volume that you put in. Whether that's going to be centimeters cubed or milliliters, you got to keep an eye out for that, okay? All right, we're going to pause in class and practice with density calculations, and then we're going to do a whole lab activity with density calculations. But for the sake of the video, we're going to keep talking about chemical properties now. So chemical properties are properties that can only be observed or measured by changing the chemical identity of a substance, by observing if a new substance is formed. So this is things like how toxic something is, how well it can decompose or rot, how flammable it is, how radioactive, that kind of thing. So a few you may not know about: flammability, you might know. That's how easily a substance is going to burn. Example, burning charcoal. But in doing so, in testing how flammable charcoal is, we've made new substances and we've done a chemical reaction. Thus, it's a chemical property. Reactivity is another chemical property. This is how easily a substance reacts. Often we're looking at how easily it reacts with like an acid or a base. For example, fluorine gas, it's highly reactive and it will spontaneously ignite a concrete block at room temperature. That's crazy. That's very reactive. Another chemical property is toxicity. This is how harmful a substance is to living organisms. So for example, carbon monoxide is a toxic gas. It can cause severe and even fatal lung damage. So that is a very toxic substance. Now, matter can undergo both physical and chemical changes. So we can manipulate matter. A physical change is when I change a substance and it's only affecting its physical properties, and not necessarily all of them, because we already talked about how changing the matter won't affect its density. But if I cut something, if I color it, like if I take a piece of paper and I cut it in half, or I color it with a marker, or I crush it up into a ball, its shape is changed, its color is changed, its size changed, but it's still paper, okay? Same with like melting or boiling or changing its state of matter. So if I have an ice cube and I melt it into liquid water, or then I boil that liquid water and it becomes water vapor, it's still water. It's just not a solid versus a liquid versus a gas. Those are physical changes. A chemical change is a change in a substance that affects its chemical properties, and thus a chemical reaction occurs and a new substance is made. So for example, if I burn something, if it rusts, if it decomposes, those are chemical changes to those types of matter, those substances. And a chemical reaction is defined as the process by which the atoms of one or more substances are rearranged and we make new substances. We'll have an entire unit on reactions. Don't worry. Now, last thing I want to end on, well, two things is one, how do you know if a chemical changes happen? How can you tell if you're just like dissolving a powder in water like you do with lemonade and you're just making a solution versus you're mixing a solute with a solvent and a chemical reaction has occurred? How can you know? Well, sometimes it's tricky, but there are some signs. So some signs you can look for is if you put two substances together and there's a flash of light, that's evidence of a chemical reaction. If there's a sudden temperature change, that is also evidence of a chemical reaction. If you see a color change or an odor change, also evidence of a chemical reaction typically. If you see a gas given off, this is called effervescence. If it starts effervescing, that's a good sign of a chemical reaction. And then if you see the sudden appearance of a solid, that solid is known as a precipitate. It forms when a chemical reaction happens between two like aqueous things and a solid essentially appears or pops up. That is also evidence of a chemical reaction. So these are kind of some things you can keep an eye out for so that you can know if a chemical reaction has happened. Okay, the last thing we have to end on is the law of conservation of matter. Okay, now this is also can be referred to as the law of conservation of mass. So those words can be used interchangeably because remember, matter has mass. So that's why these kind of work together. But I'll read it kind of both ways for your understanding. So the law of conservation of matter states that matter is neither created nor destroyed during a chemical change. It only changes form. Okay, so when a chemical reaction happens, we're not losing anything. It's not disappearing. It's just changing forms. So another way to think of this is like mass cannot be lost even when a chemical reaction happens. So for example, let's say you're reacting CH4, which is methane, and you're reacting oxygen. And let's say you have 16 grams of methane and you're reacting 64 grams of oxygen. That's 80 grams of reactants. If you have 80 grams of reactants, at the end of the reaction, we should have 80 grams of products. Okay, so this is carbon dioxide and water. It should still equal 80 grams. So 80 grams should make 80 grams. It shouldn't just quote unquote disappear. Okay, so that's what the law of conservation of matter states, or the law of conservation of mass, which basically just says the total mass of the reactants in a chemical change is equal to the total mass of the products. Okay, so same general principle. That's the law of conservation of matter, and we're going to explore that as well. So first, we're going to do some practice with identifying physical versus chemical changes and properties. Then we're going to look at the law of conservation of matter and see it at work in a lab that I think will be really fun. But that's concept 2, properties of matter.